will now try to stop and to try to explain some of the concepts, and I hope you will enjoy. I don't know how long we can do that, but just tell me when it's finished and then we can stop.
Yep.
New Extractivism, an assemblage of concepts and allegories. The word assemblage is usually understood as a collection or gathering of things or people, a machine or object made of pieces fitted together, or a work of art made by grouping together found or unrelated objects. This map and accompanying footnotes are precisely that. One big messy assemblage of different concepts and ideas, assembled into one semi-coherent picture, or let us say a map, a worldview.
So basically, this map is completely different, not completely, but it's kind of different than the previous ones that I was doing, because in previous ones I was mostly trying to understand and to map different kinds of aspects of I don't know, like networks and how the things are connected and how this like, I don't know, like this kind of deep anatomies of different objects and this materiality of internet and stuff. But then so on that road I was like, really like doing that in order to understand all of those aspects. I was mostly trying to find the guidance in different kinds of media theories, philosophy, different artworks of other people, and somehow this map it's assemblage, some kind of mix of different concepts and allegories and philosophical concepts that I try to mix into one thing and try to create some kind of coherent flow.
1. Gravity. Like Einstein's theory of relativity, massive objects curve the space and time of the topography of the internet, proportionally to their weight, defined by the number of their users and content. So we can think of massive monopolies and conglomerates such as Google and Facebook as enormous black holes that, with their gravity, create a field so intense that it attracts and swallows the content and users. 2. Forces. Many other potential vectors and social forces contribute to that gravitational force. The fear of social isolation, economic and professional insecurity, unrealistic expectations of efficiency and productivity in the adapt or die environment, tailored addictions, depression and anxieties. These are just some of the other vectors that constitute social forces that keep us, with or without our wish, attached to those platforms.
So basically I was like completely obsessed with this idea of gravity, an idea that if we try to visualize or to map the internet, like, you know, we can also think about this as some kind of space. And then this idea, I saw this concept the first time I saw with Louise Druhl. She's like one French artist, and she came. This is the first time when I saw this idea of gravity related to the internet, and I tried to think about this direction of how like all of those like big companies and big websites that we are visiting, they have their own mass, and with this mass and this gravity they are basically bending time and space, and we are just jumping from one to another and being stuck in those like gravities, and this is something that is like really relate to some issues, some visualizations that we were like doing before, for example, visualizing browsing histories. And then you always see these kind of big black dots, big black points of gravity, and most of the time it's Facebook or Google and all of those places that we are visiting, and we are constantly, you know, attracted to them. But then I was thinking, okay, it's not because Louise Druhl, she's like speaking about like number of users as a one big, you know, like that is number of users of those platforms are constituting this gravity. And then I try to expand it here with the idea that this gravity, it's also different things, different kinds of like relations, for example, addictions and all of those like, you know, for example, we are stuck in those like to those platforms because not just because many other people are visiting those platforms, but we are also stuck there because there is no other options for us, because those are the places if we want to get the job, you need to have like account on LinkedIn, or if you want, I don't know what. So there is many different reasons why we are not able to escape from from those gravities.
The social cost of opting out has become so high that opting out is essentially a fantasy. 3. Black holes. Our imaginary hero is swimming against one of those platforms' gravitational force. As they glide towards the singularity defined by the mass of these giants, users and content pass beyond the event horizon, the imaginary boundary in time and space, beyond which there is no return to the outer part of this universe. The event horizon defines the line after which the social and economic price of leaving those platforms is becoming too high. No matter how fast they try to swim now, the stream will pull them towards the center of the black hole. Without even noticing, this story's actor is now falling towards the hole into a new allegory, the cave.
So what is interesting here, it's, okay, you can think about like one allegory, it's this allegory of the black hole. And then, you know, like, so there is a moment, and also this kind of point of no return. And it's really interesting that you don't feel that point of no return. But in my story, this point is the point in which there is no way out, because the social cost of going out, it becomes too high. And then Vuk Ćosić and some other friends, they also gave me another idea. It's about escape velocity. So it's the speed or energy that you need to have in order to run away from the black hole, to go out from there. And that's like also like really interesting concept to think about. So now from here we are going from one allegory to another one at some kind of roller coaster.
4. Allegory of the cave. What takes place at the bottom of this metaphorical black hole can be described through Plato's allegory of the cave. Plato describes a group of people who spend their entire life chained to cave walls looking at a blank wall. These people are watching the shadows of real objects projected on this wall, giving them names and meanings. In our story, the script and directing of this performance of shadows are entrusted to human algorithmic machines that regulate, filter, censor and moderate the projected content on the walls of the cave. The existing elements and contents that exist outside this cave and horizon of events create an information flow, a theater of shadows.
So especially now with these pandemics and everything, you know, it became much more than allegory, you know, like, because like we really started to see the world outside our caves, our homes, only through those like extensions of our, you know, senses, only through those like screens. And for me that was like really interesting point of like, because in the original allegory of the cave, you know, you have like people outside of the cave who are like playing some kind of like theater show and creating those shadows. And here, for me, the main, you know, I had like lot of fun thinking about like who is projecting this and who is director of this play that we are seeing now. And in most of the cases, director of the play are basically different statistical functions, algorithms, many different like let's say actors that are like part of this like invisible networks that are like behind our objects, behind the screens.
5. Walls. The cave and tower walls are constructed of multiple opaque layers and built mostly by ghost work or invisible labor. The bricks of this structure are made of black boxes, closed code and hardware, glued together with the invisible network infrastructure. They are covered with layers of corporate secrets, patents and copyrights. 6. The interface. Interfaces are framing and structuring the projected algorithmic spectacle of images. Even though they are a direct manifestation of rules, regulations and taxonomies, they successfully obscure what is hidden beneath them. They define directly or indirectly what we can or cannot do. They are both tools and discursive frames. They are instituted as an order of discourse and embodiment of the disciplined power of the platform. This cave is not only...
So the question of interface is super important, because like, you know, maybe we don't think about that so much, but the interfaces are really shaping what we do. They're like creating the rules of the game. So the rules of the game in I don't know, Twitter, it's number of those hearts that you're collecting. The shape of the game, it's the square, or it's triangle, or the shape of the game, or the shape of the game, it's like story, or those like images on this Instagram or whatever. So the interfaces have a crucial role in defining what we are doing and how we are doing things. And in a sense, because they are some kind of like basically assembly line of this kind of new invisible factory in which we work.
A prison cell, but it carries out the function of a factory hall and a resource extraction apparatus. The prisoner performs their threefold function as a worker, a resource, and a product.
So these triangles are basically coming also from anatomy of an AI system, when we use like those triangles to explain the process. And also there in anatomy, like one of the chapters, it's dealing about this question of like a labor. And I think this is the most important part for me from this work. It's this kind of question of labor and this new situation, because usually we as a human beings, we were like mostly in one of those positions, you know, like either mostly in the position of the person who is working. But here in those systems now, we are in the same time being a resource that is being exploited, we are in the same time working, and we are in the same time being a product. So in a way, this like Marxist triangle of labor, it's kind of full now, you know, and most of the time we are performing all of those three functions in the same time.
7. Shadows and capture agents. The spectacle of a constant flow of information projected through the interface creates a digital shadow on the opposite wall of the cave. The projected digital shadow on the wall is a resource field where thousands of capture agents, tentacles of the rhizomatic surveillance complex, extract information. Every movement or emotional reaction is being recorded continuously. These capture agents can take many forms and sizes. From the tiny pieces of code, crawlers that wander the web, over the sensors catching heartbeats and surveillance cameras capturing our faces, to the complex network of satellites orbiting Earth. They can see our shadows through a full range of the electromagnetic spectrum. They can be invisible or massive like a 500 meters wide radio telescope. The process of quantification is reaching into the human affective, cognitive and physical worlds. Every segment of our existence reflected on our digital shadows can be seen as a form of direct or indirect labor producing data as a behavioral surplus. When we breathe, walk or sleep, every single emotion that we feel, our attention, our body temperature or diseases that we have, everything can produce a behavioral surplus if being captured by surveillance apparatus. In that sense, even our bare existence within the walls of the cave can be seen as labor. Prisoner workers need to spend more and more hours maintaining their profiles in a similar fashion to sex workers in the windows of red light districts. Digital identity labor is the forced labor of the 21st century. This creates an auto-disciplinary society where each anomaly and misbehavior is detected and quantified.
So this is my favorite part, basically, and really probably the most interesting part for me as well, because like it's this perception of like what is labor today, and this is something that is being completely exploited by all of those like gigantic companies. It's our not understanding of labor. And we had like in early 2000 this idea of Tiziana Terranova and like many authors about immaterial labor. But back then this like immaterial labor was like something that was like being mostly understood as a you know, when you are writing something, creating blog, making comments on Facebook or Google, you are basically working for them. You are creating content, and then this is this kind of form of immaterial labor. But the situation now is going much, much deeper than that, because we do not need to do anything. We don't need to write blog. We don't need to write content, because we are constantly producing information. We are constantly producing data. So it's this kind of deep immaterial labor, invisible layer, because like, for example, like what data is being exploited when you just move around city, you know. So you give information about your location, this data is being like extracted. So your data that is being extracted, it's also just like your, you know, like body ticking, or level of oxygen that you have in this moment, or your like sleep patterns, or your emotions, so it's not anymore just about this kind of form of like I'm writing something and like I'm liking something. It's about everything. So this is this new resource that I'm like, that this movie it's about like understanding that this our position as a resource that is being exploited in this like a new invisible immaterial factory. So and then like thinking like, you know, this like screw that you're seeing there, it's going deeper and deeper. So like first it was like whatever we are writing there, it's becoming a resource. But now it's just, it's our body movements, okay, but it's also like our emotions. And then with all of those new resources that are being invented or coming, you have a new economies being developed. So you can hear about like emotion economy, or you can hear about many these kind of new economies that are emerging every day. But it's basically new resources that are being exploited. And these resources are basically going deeper and deeper into our conscious, subconscious, and like wherever. So it's about this like getting deeper and deeper into our body and minds, and finding a way how to extract data out of there and create new form of profit out of there.
8. Platopticon. The gravity of these techno-giants hold billions of users, workers, products at the bottom of those caves. In this assemblage of allegories, millions of caves or prison cells form the unique and invisible panopticon structure. The central tower of this structure has two main functions: 1, to project the content on the walls of the caves, and 2, to surveil and capture the digital shadows of the prisoners reflected on the opposite wall. 9. Information retrieval. From each cell cave and through the core of the panopticon tower, streams of information are flowing into one of the central structures of this image, the data bank. The data bank is not just the engine room, but the power itself. From here, we are examining three processes crucial for this story. On one side, extracted, stored and analyzed personal data is shaping the multidimensional portrait of the individual. On the second, all the products of the user's labor are being stored, analyzed and ranked to form the information spectacle of images, meanings, and reputations.
So on one side you have, but in a way this is some kind of, it's a fantasy, you know, okay. But it's a way how to explain the thing. So we have like those like, you know, caves or whatever, and then on one side you have projection. You know, this is what we are seeing. On the other side we have a shadow. So in the same moment this shadow is being extracted. So this is what is happening on the left side from this. And on the right side there is like a process of creation of this spectacle. So this is like some kind of butterfly and how it's presented here. So extraction of information and this creation of this like continuous reality show that we are seeing.
Furthermore, in the third one, this structure lies upon the top of the exploitation of human minds, bodies and nature. 10. Creation of data body. Our online behavior is captured, processed, and deconstructed into statistical vectors, clusters, patterns, and anomalies. Each move we make is carefully analyzed by thousands of mathematical functions, algorithms, and machine learning systems. This system does not see us through linear narratives emerging from our browsing behavior, metadata, or movements in physical space, but as n-dimensional statistical projections. Each and every one of our clicks sharpens the resolution and complexity of this abstract and constantly changing statistical portrait or data body. 11. Individuals. These multidimensional data portraits of the individual, consisting of millions of data points in hundreds of dimensions, can be seen as what Deleuze will name individual. A physically embodied human subject that is endlessly divisible and reducible to data representations via the modern technologies of control. The critical art ensemble is describing this data body as the fascist sibling of the virtual body, a much more highly developed virtual form, and one that exists in complete service to the corporate and police state.
So here, so what is this like? Here we are speaking about, again, some just try to think about this kind of like another, your mirror, or like another you that is being created by all of those like databases. And here we are not speaking about one database, so it's not about, you know, what Google knows about you, but all of them together are basically have, if we combine all of those information, we have some kind of like digital representation, and this quality and of this, let's say, like digital portrait of you that they have, it's higher and higher with every new dimension of data that they are collecting. And then here also it trying to explain how basically then those like databases are controlling you, and how they influence basically what you are seeing and what you can do, or how you should behave, or whatever.
12. Condividuals. Dividual is always open to interaction, always ready to be detached from, and attached to, other dividuals that share some properties with it, creating collective agents as condividuals, or supersubjects. The mountains and valleys of multidimensional, ever-changing, invisible, algorithmic landscapes are clustering individuals and creating new relations, taxonomies, and ontologies. 13. Surveillant assemblage. The full picture of our individual being is not centralized in one place, but is spread across hundreds of data centers in the rhizomatic assemblage of the surveillance economy and government actors. This non-heterogeneous and dispersed assemblage portrait exists through the system of data dealers, the official and unofficial exchange of data, in constant flow forming one functional entity. 14. Content extraction. Each web page or other piece of content that is being captured in the wild is rendered and analyzed. This content is being extracted into hundreds of different signals. Collected content and extracted data become a permanent corporate resource for creating multidimensional, dynamic, complex topologies in which every piece of data becomes an object that is contextually linked to other objects. Within this map, this new meta-territory, crawl hundreds of different mathematical functions, algorithms, and neural networks that we can call instruments of measurement and perception. 15. Instruments of measurement and perception. Those instruments of measurement and perception always come with inbuilt aberrations. The shape of the algorithmic lenses is carefully crafted to project the image that is in accordance with the platform's financial interest and political goals and values. Platforms often imply direct rules and regulations. They have direct power of regulation of what can be seen or said, what kind of content can and cannot exist in their universe. Here we are visually representing those rules and regulations as filters. Similarly to the algorithmic lenses, the fabric of those filters is crafted according to the platform's financial interests and political goals and values. 16. Projection of the world. Instruments of measurement and perception are ranking and defining hierarchies and relations between content, users, and meaning. They define the digital regime of truth and order. This regime is a prism through which the world is projected in the form of the constant stream of spectacles on the walls of the caves. 17. Engines of extraction. Empowered by the digital extractivism tools of the information age, everything becomes a potential frontier for expansion and extraction. From the depth of DNA code in every single cell of the human organism, to vast frontiers of human emotions, behavior and social relations, to nature as a whole, everything becomes the territory for the new extractivism. At this moment in the 21st century, we see a new form of extractivism that is well underway, one that reaches into the furthest corners of the biosphere and the deepest layers of human cognitive and affective being.
So basically it's not, now this is like some kind of another topic and another chapter. So in this first part of this movie, like it was mostly about this kind of new forms of extractivism that is like extraction of data, extraction of our emotion, extraction of our whatever we do and tralala. Here we are back on this, what we were like discussing and speaking about in Anatomy of an AI System. So on one side you have extraction of data and everything, but on another side, also important side, it's that all of those like infrastructures that are doing this extraction, they also run on some energy and they're also made of something, and they are also, so we need also to speak about this like standard and classical way of like you know, of extraction of minerals, extraction of like human labor that exist in this kind of like production chains and so on.
18. Enclosure and affinity to infinity. In the transition to the information age, capitalism was given a chance to satisfy its affinity for infinity, to form and conquer an infinite number of new territories, to create new mechanisms for the accumulation of capital within these new spaces, and to formulate new forms of exploitation. Once the territory is invaded, the process of enclosure and exploitation is established. New forms of extractivism are expanding into the territories far behind the biodiversity and knowledge enclosure. This is why we are not speaking anymore just about the knowledge economy, but about the attention economy, emotion economy, and many other new economies being born from the invasion of new territories of extraction. 19. Fractal supply chains. Supply chains hidden behind the engines of extractivism are black boxes as much as neural networks or algorithms hidden behind interfaces. Each triangle of this fractal represents one phase in the production process, from birth in a geological process, through life as a consumer product, and ultimately to death in an electronics dump. Within the fractal supply chain, we see a perpetual dance between human labor, non-human labor, earth labor, and automatization. 20. Blood, sweat, and toxic lakes. Every click or swipe we make online creates one little hole in the ground, filled with toxic waste and covered by toxic clouds. Every movement of materials and data within the planetary scale factory has its own hidden price. Supply chains are optimized towards maximizing profit for a few, while the real costs of the destruction that follows are shared among all the living entities on the planet in the present and the future. One molecule after another is extracted by labor and technique to make things for humans, but the waste products don't return so that the cycle can renew itself. 21. Triangular trade. Slavery was at the heart of the development of the modern planetary scale global economy. From those days, the same model of constant flow within the vast fractal production chains expanded in time, space, and complexity. The transatlantic slave trade evolved into the contemporary planetary scale factory. 22. Chains of digital colonialism. Traditional colonial practices of control over critical assets, trade routes, natural resources and exploitation of human labor are still deeply embedded in the contemporary supply chains, logistics and assembly lines of digital content, products and infrastructure. In that sense, chains of digital colonialism are made both on the extraction of digital surplus and the traditional exploitation of labor and resources. The concepts presented are mostly represented here visually, in the form of allegories. Dictionaries define allegory as a story, poem, or picture that can be interpreted to reveal a hidden meaning, typically a moral or political one. All of these allegories and concepts together, joined in the form of an assemblage, create together a blueprint of a machine-like superstructure, or a super-allegory. In that sense, what we have here is an almost fractal allegorical structure, an allegory, within an allegory, within an allegory.
Okay, so luckily you survived this movie, and thank you. It is a bit dark. No, because in the beginning I was like thinking it's kind of funny, but more I'm looking at it, I realize it's really dark. Yeah, yeah. For me, what was the interesting thing? I was like mostly like making maps before, and now here I try to make some kind of like a linear narrative in a way, because when you are creating video, it's different. When you have a map, then you can do like whatever, you know, like you can go from one side to another. You can read maps in different directions. You can. Maps are usually non-literal, non-linear narratives, no? But here, this one, it's a different attempt, and what I really like about it, it sounds like some kind of like educational material, but from some kind of another dimension. maybe real dimension, but okay, potentially real. And yeah, and it's kind of like interesting also to think, like for me after like doing this and seeing this, it's like this question like how we end up in this version of the universe. It's like a really weird scenario, no? It's like there was like so many different, maybe so many different ways how we can end up from like, you know, something that is like, you know, like open, decentralized, you know, protocol for communication that each of us can be, you know, like this, have a same weight as other people. It's some kind of like wonderful technology, but we somehow end up in this really weird scenario in which now we are some kind of resource for some kind of invisible labor and some kind of mega corporations and you know, like in caves and everything. So in that sense, maybe it's interesting to try to imagine some kind of different scenario than this one, you know, that we apparently live. And yeah, that's the. If there is any questions or like remarks and
So, what do we do to break free, to kind of rebel against the system? What can we do?
well, I don't know. I think probably a lot of things. Like I don't know. I'm not so good in giving answers to these kind of questions. I'm better in like trying to visualize and map existing problems and reality than projecting the solutions. But you know, there is a variety. It's a spectrum of possibilities. From one side, let's say, like from some kind of neo-ludist, like Ted Kaczynski style interventions to, I don't know, trying to make a better laws about I don't know what. And so there is like a different spectrum. I'm not favoring any of them. I think we are in such a serious situation that any attempt to change this, it's good, you know. So I think it's also like how you feel about like, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, so along the same lines, I think Evgeny Morozov talks about techno-exceptionalism and how in the mainstream ideology people try to say, oh, we never had this before and so on. So in that sense, one of the ways I would be wondering about how do we break free would be trying to see what is new about this, essentially. Because the tendencies for monopolies and extracting labor of different forms of humans is as old as the system that we live in is. So now we have a different manifestation, but what do you think is essentially different than it used to be?
I think what is essentially different, okay, it's basically the new. Before, mostly, we were mostly able to understand when we are working and when we are not working. Because to go to work means to go to something, to do something for someone, usually. And now it's everything, it's like blended into one, you know, like some kind of like mix in which everything is mixed, you know, and there is, and so the forms of exploitation are so capillary, so, you know, going so deep and so tiny that we are now not even able to say and to feel that we are. But what we are seeing is some kind of extraction. We are seeing accumulation of power, but we are not, you know, being able to understand from where this thing is coming from. And for example, for me, it's usually you are able to see and to understand the factory. And what I was doing for like last, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, it's trying to understand how the factory works and where is the factory, you know. And then you really need to do a lot of crazy things in order to understand materiality of the factory and where it is, and am I part of the factory, or like to answer to the question of like, you know, where is the end of YouTube? You know, am I the end, not the end in time, but like if you see this like factory in some kind of, as some kind of like, you know, organism or some kind of like structure, you know, where it ends, you know, am I now part of this because like this is hosted there and like transmitted, you know, like, so it's really hard to understand the shapes of exploitation and shapes of like new labor relations and like, and for me this is the most interesting part.
So here's there's really a lot to unpack here. So it's a really nice presentation. Thank you, because it is needed. So for us, yeah, to just understand complexities of all of these ideas. But one thing that I kind of find missing, because it is something that I thought about and that is important for me when thinking about these things, is you do not specifically talk about time as a domain. You concentrate on meaning, on data, on different aspects of that, where it's coming and going, but just the simplest thing, you know, even that app that you have on phone, like those wellness app, oh, close your phone, you're too long on your phone, and YouTube telling you it's late, go to bed, and stuff like that. They don't say, oh, you watched too much dark videos, go watch something nice, or something like that. They just go for a simple thing, time. So isn't that also an important resource? Like you're scrolling, you're not fighting the system, you're scrolling, liking, maybe hate mailing, whatever, but you're wasting your time. So that is, for me, that is an important dimension.
Completely, and in some new research and map or cartography I'm working now, the time, it's really one of the you know, lines there, and in a way this situation of like segmentation of time and segmentation of time and labor, and basically how from the, because like this map that I'm working on now, it's basically starting from like 1500 until today, so it's about time, and how also in the sense of like time, how we had like before, for example, like difference between this kind of like agrarian time and factory time, and how time became more and more important, and how time it became more and more segmented, and how now we are constantly in some kind of like you know, short pace, speed and time, and yeah, time, it's super, super, super important. And then if you think about Foucault, time and space, and how, you know, like this kind of control of time and space became new form of, you know, like torture and control and everything. Yeah.
Another question, like a thought, how to solve this. Do you think that if we had now technology that will allow, like, everyone that is participating in these networks, or on the first slide of your presentation, this plane, like, would there be like any kind of shift towards everyone is able now to use software to build their own part of the network, not to be part of one big network that is held by, I don't know, some big corporation, but every one of us can hold some kind of software on some kind of hardware and be little piece of the federated network. Would that be, do you think that would be a solution of this problem?
Yep, probably that's one of the you know, probably that's one of the possible solutions, you know, like then, you know, any solution that it's not like such a big concentration of like non-transparent power, it's better. And I really believe in like different forms of like, you know, self-management and like this kind of open source and everything, and yeah, but I also learned to with time to understand and to try to understand like why we are all the time failing, you know, in fight with those process of like centralizations, and how they all, you know, it's usually how the things end up. And I hope, like, you know, I think internet was probably a really good, and maybe still, like, it was a maybe game changer in which like we were able to do something, but we somehow missed the opportunity with this one. Maybe it's not the end. Maybe we can still do it, because people are starting to you know, get tired and starting to be, you know, tired of all of these things. So maybe it will change.
Yeah, people love simplicity. People love simplicity. So how many of us here host our own email server? I mean, like, most of us could do it. We know, but still we use like other services and we centralize. So that's the main issue. We're lazy. Alessandro wanted to.
Yeah. Now, on one side, there was a term that came in mind, which was passivity, that you were kind of, I mean, hinting somehow, which is, I mean, there are always this dualism, passivity on one side and hyperactivity on the other. The extraction of data and sense on one side, and establishment and establishing services which are meant, I mean, look like the replacement of missed public services, for example. I wanted to put to highlight this specifically. I mean, I was joking about that when we did Google, we did surf in making Google a universal public service instead of being a company. But I mean, it's also how is it perceived, how a part, maybe, I would like to know what you think about part of this attraction, because this passivity, it's also led, maybe, what do you think about that, by this, let's say, it's not only the spectacle of entertainment, like it was for television, for example. Here we have a spectacle of services, which sometimes are deadly useful and which are not provided by the entities that should provide them. So it's more complex in the end. And the last thing I wanted to mention is quantification. It's one of the extraction. It's also based on quantification. So one of the, let's say, guerrilla tactics which have been applied in the past, but might be applied in a more general space is boycotting the quantification probably undermines quite a bit of the strategies. I'll stop here.
Yeah. A lot of yeah, but it's also interesting to think about this, like this kind of like personal responsibility, and then to think about like in the sense of climate change, how this idea of personal responsibility was basically some kind of PR campaign of British Petroleum, like how it's on us, it's on us as a and individuals and users. It's all on us, our responsibility, how we behave, we should do or not, and stuff like this. But at the end, as we saw through especially in like anatomy of AI system, there is like, planetary scale system of exploitation that it's not on us basically so much. It's about like generating a lot of power. So I'm always skeptical at the end on this kind of like putting the pressure on the individual instead of trying to analyze system, like turn off the light because I don't know what will happen if you don't, So, and then in that sense, this kind of guerrilla actions I found like really super interesting as some kind of like how we can, create different kinds of like, tactics to fight this and stuff like this. But it's really hard to do that. And in a sense, it's also position of privilege. Like to do that, because like, like 90% of the people doesn't have this position and in the beginning, this is like the beginning of this like video, you have this kind of like question of gravity, and who have possibility not to have an email. That what kind of privilege is that? And then there is this story about how when they asked Hillary Clinton, when there was like this scandal about, and they asked, what about Bill Clinton? And then she said he doesn't have an email. And that's a super privilege, not to have an email. But how many of us can be in that position to do that, to opt out, to say, okay.
So, because it's interesting, so is there anyone who is actually outside of this system, or did we in some weird way achieve that initial form of equality that you were talking about? Because, Elon Musk, like the richest person in the world, was recently blackmailed because he was leaving his traces about his plane trajectories and things like that. So is there anyone who is actually outside of that system?
He's just playing with that. For him, this is part of the game, part of the spectacle. He's misusing this power to disturb the markets, to do like whatever he wants with this power that he have. And I think like Jeff Bezos doesn't tweet a lot. It's not his game, for example. Like, and when he do, he screw up something. But I think we are not in the same position. No,
We are not.
No. We are deeply not. And also, it also creates this other. So, for example, one of the main games here in this kind of like new immaterial economy, it's this reputation game. It's a kind of reputation systems, because like we all compete because we are not paid, then we will play this reputation game and then like collect those hearts and stuff like this. And I think that's also like really dangerous, because like the reputation, it's also being commodified by all of those, like you know, Facebook, Google, number of likes, number of shares, number of followers. You know, that this is all. It's basically commodification of reputation. And but the problem is we don't have an option. You know, you need to be like really super badass to say, okay, I don't care completely. You know, I'm just speaking to, but I'm not saying anything to anyone. I'm not part of the reputation systems and stuff like this. So, yeah.
We have a question here next to you.
Oh, I felt you slightly answered it, so I wasn't going to ask a question because I was going to, like, this is a big, all-inclusive map, and maybe Jeff Bezos just scrolled off the top. But where are you on this?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm deeply this guy, you know, like I'm 100% there. I'm not even trying to think that I'm the one who is swimming, you know, I'm no.
Okay, thank you.
But that's the, I think the really important part of really important part of this self-realization, it's not to lie to yourself. It's to acknowledge that you are, because once you acknowledge that you are in the cave, then maybe you can go out from the cave. Then to all the way think that, okay, I'm the one who is like now, you know, like. But in the original allegory of the cave, probably most of us, we know what's going on at the end. So like the person who is like, and this is maybe also the answer to what Philip said. So they went out from the cave, but then the light was too bright, and like then they came back. It's also.
I just had a couple of things. One on the idea of privilege. Some people do have a bigger cave, and I appreciate that. And a bigger cave is actually better in this case. But the other thing I didn't like was the idea that through personal responsibility and mental fortitude, you don't have to be in this position. And this kind of idea keeps coming to us from the people who perpetrate oppression. Like a simple thing, hydrogenated fats, junk food, especially in America. The people who make it and profit by it say, well, if you didn't eat like a pig, you'd be fine. So it's not our fault. So somehow our captivity is the result of our moral inferiority, as opposed to understanding that to break this kind of system requires the only black hole that's bigger than the companies, which is usually the government.
I really like this idea of architecture of the cave, how big it is, what from, you know, how those walls are made of, I don't know, this material and that material, and I think that, yeah, the size of the cave also matters. Yeah.
Yes, I have one question about those gravity masses. Don't you think that as a human nature is that we're always in some proximity to gravity masses? In Middle Ages, nobody could survive on its own, and now we're talking about privilege of not having an email. If you don't have it, you can survive. Some old people don't have emails, but somebody is taking care of them. If they didn't have those people, they wouldn't survive. So, don't you think that this is a great presentation? But don't you think it's more in our nature to always have a big black mass that is drawing us to somewhere dark place because of our nature? And what to do about that? Thank you.
Yeah, but you are right. You're right. We are probably, you know, attracted by the mass. It's probably, you know, like a gravity. We cannot do a lot about it. And yeah, No, it's just a question of like, if we need, and I think all of those things like really accelerated our lives and created like some kind of like, but there is a probably better way to deal with it than this one. And it's right, if we are really attracted to big gravities, big masses, maybe, you know, it can be done in a different way. You know, it can be moderated in different way. The way how it's moderated now, it's basically the rule of capital, the rule of like, you know, like what makes more money, what makes less money. And this is like, for example, if you think about this part of, I don't know, remember like those balls, and this like some kind of landscapes. And the shape of these algorithmic landscapes are basically not shaped with the vision of some kind of better, you know, future for all of us. Shape of those like mountains and valleys, it's created basically on what makes more money. So this is why how all of those algorithms are being optimized. They're not optimized for a social good. They're optimized for you know, creation of the profit. So they're playing on the border. They know, you know, I cannot put this like so much there because then the users will leave the platform. But you know, like the main logic is to have this kind of constant process of extraction. So to keep everyone being there and to extract to create profit. But there is a many different relations that we can create. You know, we can, for example, you know, like compete in some kind of different disciplines. It doesn't need to be like what creates more money. It's more like what is better for us as a society, what is better for us as a human beings, what is better for this community, or what is, you know, but that's not the rules. That's not the rules of the game. The rules of the game, it's like what is making more money in this like invisible factory, because at the end it's still a factory. It's not a you know, service, like social, like, you know, like common good. It's a factory. It's a company, and it's, yeah. But then I'm also in the same way, kind of like if you think, okay, what if all of this it's like nationalized, and what if this is all you know, then like, oh my God, you know, like there is a different countries, different, so we can think about here, for example, what if all of this just belongs to Telecom Serbia? Like, oh, no, I'm not so sure that that's because, for example, in our case here, the local Telecom Serbia, it's one of the most, you know, it's really corrupt in the sense of like, for example, data retention and many other ways. So there is no, I think there is no easy answer for this. Like, in order to have like, if we say, okay, this is as a service and belong to all of us as a group, as a system, like which one? National one, state one? Like, it's not an easy.
We have a last question here.
Okay, so on the last question. So basically, I gotta bring back the topic of it's not up to the individuals. So as compared to the carbon footprint, which in most cases the companies are responsible for most of the pollution, in these cases it's actually kind of up to the individual. So we all can basically quit social media. Like, we can do it, but we choose not to because it feels good to scroll one last time because maybe something pops up that's interesting, and it doesn't. Never will, maybe once, but like, it's mostly up to us, and we are generating the most of the content, and our choices are what makes our profile look like. So like, we can choose like encrypted emails, we can choose to use Signal, or there are multiple others, but for example Signal, we can choose not to use social media, and like, isn't it kind of up to the individual?
No, but the thing is, you can choose if you are in the position of little power. You know, like every, you know, when your job depends on this. For example, like what is like really scary now, it's like this like relation between those big data collectors and different government systems or like other companies. So for example, once this data, once US immigration system start to analyze Facebook data, you are becoming, if you don't have social media profile, you are type of anomaly. So.
True, agreed.
And then like it's not, and this space it's closing in a sense of like it's not just this, it's also like applying for like life insurance. It's also like if you wear this bracelet with I don't know like this data sensor, then the like insurance will be cheaper 20% because we are now aware that you are healthy customer and stuff like this. So,
but then again, it's our choices. Exactly, those type of devices are completely optional, but most of us will actually choose to use them, and that's awful.
It's optional if you have a choice to have this extra 20% and to say, I don't care about this 20%. This 20% money means less to me. I care more about privacy than this 200 euros. But if you don't have those 200 euros, then that's the problem. This is like where...
That's the privilege.
Yeah, exactly. It's where the yeah. And then if...
I get you.
Yeah.
So before thanking Vladan for discussing all of his artwork with us, I cannot wait for even darker story for next DESCON.
No, the next one, it's about like how it's everything would say because it was the same like all the time.
Oh, then don't spoil it just as yet. So a big round of applause for Vladan and for you as well. And then just a couple of announcements. We are having a Climerco workshop, a short one downstairs with Vanya. And in that workshop, we will be joined by Zoom call from Colorado with Dr. Joanna Casey, and her students are working on Climerco data. And tomorrow she will join us via Zoom link to say what they worked on. But we do have a set of really bright topics tomorrow. And we start at 11 tomorrow, so a little bit later than today. And we will cover right to repair. Among other things, we'll hear from about uses of data, environmental data that some students are working on. We'll have also a talk about open source and open technologies and how they can be part of a solution. And we will, you can check out the program, but I also think that we have a last topic by Danny O'Brien, and its title is Save the World, as so it sounds a little bit more positive. Maybe we cannot guess what Danny will have. So please feel free. We will close at 7 for people online. We'd like to thank them for joining. There were how many comments? Yeah, there are a few comments, and we thank our technician here and everyone else. We will leave around 7 here, so please feel free to help yourself with a drink if you're not joining us for the workshop in the corner. And see you tomorrow. Thank you.